Thank you so much for attending this talk, in which I will be discussing whether the manner of language acquisition in bilinguals mean anything for prediction in reading, and specifically for lexical and morphosyntactic prediction. So before we get to the specific of the study, I would like to actually stop and talk about the prediction itself. By this point, I'm pretty sure that many of you learned by heart what we mean when we say prediction, because there's so many talks in this conference were and will be about prediction. But just so we are on the same page, I would like to start with a small exercise and ask you to read the sentence to yourself, right? And I will read it out loud for you. It's raining hard outside. Don't forget your, and right. Many of you were able to successfully generate the expectation of the next word, which is umbrella. But this expectation doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not random, right? So it's based on the predictive cues given out by the sentence, and specifically by the highly constraining context of the sentence. So based on this context, you were able to pre-activate some information, for instance, semantic information, something about relative to weather conditions outside, and generate this expectation of umbrella. So the pre-activation of some kind of information of an input before you actually hear or read the input is prediction. And now we know that monolingual speakers generate these predictions, and actually the prediction facilitates efficient sentence processing. We can talk about different types of prediction. For instance, what you did just right now is that you engaged in full lexical prediction if you were able to generate umbrella as a prediction. So you were able to anticipate specific lexical item and its grammatical form, meaning that you didn't say umbrellas, right? And probably many of you say umbrella and not the coat, although it's also possible. So it's a specific lexical item and its grammatical form. Now we know also that this kind of prediction is actually pretty rare. And the highly constraining context sentences are not very common in natural language. What is more common is graded prediction, for example, morphosyntactic prediction, when you can activate just some specific features of the upcoming words, for instance, word class, number, gender, and case, if the language has them. For instance, if you said, don't forget your coat, you were still right, and you predicted that the next upcoming word should be a noun and probably should be singular. So you were engaging in morphosyntactic prediction. So now, how do we actually catch the effect of prediction? How do we know that speaker is engaged in the process of prediction? What we can do is measure it kind of offline when we explicitly ask participants to predict, for instance, in the close test with final words, or online. And the consensus right now in the literature, so when we do online experiments, we should look at the effects that appear before or in very early stages of processing the target word. For instance, it's possible in a visual world paradigm with eye tracking, right? If you hear the sentence, it's raining hard outside, don't forget your, you will probably, let me get my laser point here. You'll probably do a lot of anticipatory looks to the umbrella even before you hear the word umbrella. Or in ERPs, we can get their effect early on the target word when there is an N400 effect on the unexpected word. Or in eye movements in reading, we can look at the earliest eye movement measures on the target word, for instance. So these measures are believed to reflect the very early lexical access to the words. This measures first fixation duration, single fixation duration on the word, skipping probability, or to a less extent gaze duration. So this is the sum of fixations before you move further when you first time reading the sentence. So, okay, now we know that monolinguals predict, but do bilinguals do so? And this is the hot question in the, I would say, in the last decade for sure. And in a very an amazing review that is actually prefaced to the book that is coming out soon, Khan and Gruder say, yes, they do. But the prediction, the degree of prediction depends on multiple factors, such as cross-linguistic influence. For example, let's say we do morphosyntactic prediction and our dominant language is English and we read in Russian. And we want to see if we can predict the gender of the upcoming noun. But English does not have agreement in gender and, let's say, adjectives. So there is no transfer of these predictive cues from L1 to L2. So that might actually lead to a lesser degree of prediction or to no prediction at all. And this all, of course, depends on the proficiency of the speaker, exposure, including the manner of a second language acquisition. This is how and when you learn the language. And I highlighted this in bold because this will be the focus of this study. And of course, the task demands. For instance, if the task is too complicated, the cognitive resources are spent somewhere else, not on the prediction. Well, actually, Kanegruder suggests the utility account of bilingual prediction, in which bilinguals engage in sort of cost-benefit analysis. They weigh the benefits of predicting over the cost of it. They're asking, is it worth engaging in prediction right now? Are the predictive cues in the language I'm doing the task reliable? And the conclusion might be that it's not. I would actually spend my time and resources somewhere else and not the prediction to achieve the efficient processing of the sentence. Another recent account of the prediction also is prediction by production that also takes into account all of these factors. And it posits that the prediction is involving the same processes as our production. We are going through the stage one, prediction by association, where we activate by means of spreading activation off of the information that is conceptually relevant. And then stage two, the same process as in production, morphology, syntax, and phonetic word form. So this account actually hypothesizes that bilinguals may never reach the second stage of prediction, and they stop at the stage one, which is more automatic. So it's only spread activation that works, the conceptualization stage. So in this study, we are focusing on the manner of acquisition, but also taking into account all of the other factors that I listed in the previous slide. And we are asking, does the method of acquisition of the non-dominant language create differentiation ability for lexical in experiment number 1 and morphosyntactic prediction in experiment number 2 in bilingual reading? To contrast the manner of acquisition, we collected data from 2 different groups of bilingual speakers who differ in the manner of acquisition. These are heritage speakers and second language learners, and they differ in timing, setting, and the mode of language acquisition. So heritage speakers acquire their heritage language early in naturalistic environment and primarily in auditory modality. While second language learners go to school or university to study the second language, they receive the formal education, and it's both in written and auditory modality. So just to overview what I will be talking in the rest of the time I have, we did the 2 experiments. Experiment number 1, it's lexical prediction, an offline measure, and we used the closed test in reading. And experiment number 2, online, morphosyntactic prediction, where we asked our participants to read the sentences with eye tracking that contained the gender agreement violations. Our participants were English dominant heritage speakers and second language learners of Russian. And of course, we had a group of monolingual controls also. Before they did experiment number 1 or experiment number 2, we also asked them to perform 2 tests that measured their oral reading fluency in English and Russian, and they actually matched on those tests. We also used them as a proxy of their proficiency. They did the vocabulary test, best passive vocabulary size, and collected some self-estimated data on speaking and comprehension in Russian, their daily Russian exposure, reading age when they start reading in Russian, and age arrival to the United States. Why I'm talking about this, it's because we later included these factors into the models to see what affects their prediction. Our hypothesis. For the lexical prediction, we actually thought that heritage speakers might outperform second language learners, or maybe even be on par with monolingual group. We base this prediction because, well, heritage speakers have early exposure to heritage language, they have more exposure, and they have a generally great command of the spoken language. So if we go back to the prediction by production account, that might mean that heritage speakers are able to go through all of the stages of prediction and complete the full lexical prediction. For morphosyntactic prediction, our hypothesis were the opposite. We thought that second language learners might outperform heritage speakers based on what we know about them. Second language learners always typically outperform heritage speakers in written modality. They receive the formal instruction on gender agreement specifically in school or university, and heritage speakers are known to have difficulties with gender agreement or assignment. We're not going into this depth here in the heritage language. So experiment number 1, closed test. What we did is we asked our participants to read 48 sentences, half of them in highly constraining and half of them in low constraining context, and complete the sentence with one final word, the first one that comes to mind. Target words varied in length, part of speech, but they were all high frequency words. So for instance, the sentence in highly constrained context would look like this. Maria recently got married. Yesterday, she introduced everyone to her new husband. We allowed participants to read to themselves in the tempo that they're comfortable with. We actually also allowed them to access the translations of every word in the sentence. So we knew that they understood the sentence. What they did is they read to themselves, and they were asked to pronounce the final word, and the experiment wrote it down in the form how it was pronounced. Without further ado, let's overlook the results. So our predictions were sort of confirmed. We can see that heritage speakers predicted generated predictions with higher probability than second language learners. It was significant, but nowhere near monolingual controls, actually. For heritage speakers, as models showed, it was the vocabulary size and Russian daily exposure that led to the more prediction, the generating more predictions. For second language learners, it was the oral reading fluency in Russian. What is also interesting fact is that second language learners actually produced a lot of words that were semantically related to the expected words, to the target words, but sometimes they did not even fit into syntactic structure of the sentence. That might lead to a suggestion that according to the prediction by production stage, they stopped at the first stage, the spread and activation stage, the conceptualization stage. So they just generated predictions based on some semantic features of the word. Now, the next experiment was eye tracking. And in this experiment, we asked participants to read 32 sentences while their eye movements were recorded. Half of these sentences contained gender agreement violations between the adjective and the upcoming noun. We also had filler sentences, of course, 33 of them, so they do not, they're distracted and not adjusted to the structure. All target words were high frequency words or cognates. All sentences, the experimental ones, consist of 11 words. Adjectives was on the 4th place, and the noun was on the 8th place in the sentence with preposition phrase in between. Why did we do so is that there is something in between the agreeing adjective and its noun, so that the noun is not in a paraphrasal view when we fixate the adjective. Because if it's in the paraphrasal view, what will happen is we might see not the prediction, but we might see the integration of the information. So let me show you the examples of the stimuli that we used. We manipulated the sentences in 2 by 2 by 2 within subject design. We manipulated the gender, masculine and feminine, phonological transparency of the nouns. So in Russian, if the nouns end in non-palatal consonant, they assigned masculine grammatical gender. If they end in stressed A, it's consistently feminine gender. But there are also opaque nouns that end in palatalized consonant. They might be either masculine or feminine. What we thought would happen is that, okay, second language learners would outperform heritage speakers because of the reasons that I listed before, but maybe heritage speakers would be at least equal to second language learners in a transparent condition, because they can consistently rely on the predictive cues of the nouns. And of course, the last manipulation was grammaticality. For instance, you can see the stimuli here. Adjective on the fourth place, this is grammatically correct. The noun, preposition phrase in between. I do have the procedure and the video for you, so you can see for yourself how it was conducted. So we ask participants to read the sentence to themselves in a tempo that is comfortable for them. When they finish reading the sentence, they should fixate the red dots, and then they had comprehension questions. Some of the sentences were followed by the comprehension questions with multiple choice answers. So for instance, this is the sentence from the experiment. This is ungrammatical sentence. So this adjective does not match in gender with this noun, and this is the reading by monolingual speaker from the control group. This is the gaze, the pink dot that you see on the screen right now. And you can see, right, so the fixation's longer, there's some returning back to reread the sentence. And this is the reading by the heritage speakers of the same ungrammatical sentence. You can see that fixations in general are slower, but we don't see, as for now, like, right, just looking by it, that they kind of differ fixating on any of the words in the sentence. So let's see the results. I would remind you that our dependent variables were the early measures of eye movement. So first fixation duration, single fixation duration, gaze duration, and skipping probability. They are believed to reflect the early stages of lexical access. We didn't look at the later stages because we wanted to see the effects of prediction, not the integration. And what we can see is nicely depicted on the scan path pictures, the graphs. For instance, if we look at this panel here, this is monolingual, reading the grammatical sentence. You can see it's a fast reading, not too many regressions back. The fixations are fast, but see what happens in the ungrammatical condition. The participants read till the noun, comes back to read the prepositional phrase, comes back to read the not matching adjective, and there is a lot more reading going on. So definitely there is some cognitive processing of reanalysis, syntactic reanalysis happening. If you look at heritage speakers, second language learners, you would not see the contrasting differences between grammatical and ungrammatical conditions. And the generalized linear mixed effect modeling that we fit confirmed this. So monolinguals were sensitive to violations in single fixation durations and gaze durations, while neither heritage speakers or second language learners were. In fact, when we asked them explicitly after we conducted all of the experiments, if they noticed that there were violations, they said no. So none of them noticed them, and they were very disappointed because they said that they had this knowledge of agreement, and second language learners received some classes in it, but they still did not see them while reading. So to summarize, in experiment number 1, we saw that heritage speakers outperformed language learners, but not were on par on monolingual readers. And while I say outperformed, their predictability was at 57%, so it's not as high, but still better than second language learners. Lexical prediction in heritage language is contingent on vocabulary and Russian exposure, and we saw that lexical prediction in second language was contingent on reading fluency. For morphosyntactic prediction, we did not see the evidence with a specific noun gender prediction in bilingual reading. So we suggest that in lexical prediction, early naturalistic exposure to language as in heritage language aids lexical prediction when the task is easy, when there is access to translation, there are no linguistic manipulations, when the heritage speakers are actually kind of forced to predict, right? So they maybe the utility account tells us that with sufficient proficiency, vocabulary, heritage speakers chose to predict. And prediction by production account tells us that heritage speakers might complete all of the stages, but second language learners stopped at the conceptualization one. For morphosyntactic prediction, utility account tells us, well, maybe because it was a line, the reading was too resource consuming. There was prepositional phrase in between. They had to maybe spend some cognitive resources on integrating that information. They focus on the lexical access of the currently fixated word. And remember, there is no transfer from English to Russian. So the cues in Russian, the gender cues, might be not reliable in reading in Russian. So in this cost-benefit analysis for our bilinguals doing the reading, not predicting was perhaps the more efficient way to process the sentence. And that's it for this talk. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to answering the questions.